Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I know today is not Saturday. I did not have time to fully finish editing this video, so you guys are going to be seeing this on Sunday. So this is going to be basically part 2 from Monday's video where we did kind of like a 1-hour drawing session, sketching session, whatever you want to call it, of both Phainon and Mydei's kind of like idol outfits that I wanted to do because I was like dead set on making photocards for these particular 2 characters, and this is going to be mostly the photocard making-ish process. So probably for the first half of the video, we are going to be working on the sketching and drawing, and then the later half will be me setting up the file alongside with cutting or printing and cutting of our photocards. So I have done this in the past, but I wanted to show you guys a little bit more of like the full process once again if you have missed those previous videos. And I think the one that I ended up doing, I don't remember who I drew or what exactly was the probably Plave Photocards is probably the one that has a bit more of an in-depth kind of like not a tutorial basically, but more of a step-by-step as well as a little bit more of explanation of what I'm doing. This one's kind of more of like an overall showing the process, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the video regardless. But let's get started and talk about what we're going to be starting off with. So because on Monday's video, I did end up making at least like waist up versions of their outfits, we are just going to be focusing on sketching out a bit of like a rough sketch for our characters first, and then moving on to a clean sketch, and then eventually we'll do coloring and rendering afterwards. So starting off, we are working with Phainon first because I'm gonna be so real. I thought he was going to be the easier one for me to draw among the 2. Phainon is very much more of the type of character that I typically draw. He's very handsome, more on the, I guess, like pretty side in that case. I've talked about this in the past as well. But Mydei is a little bit more of like, he's still pretty and handsome, obviously, but he's a little bit more masculine, a little bit more demeanor-wise seems a little bit more colder, definitely like sharper eyes, and Phainon's a little bit more like puppy vibes, like golden retriever dog, very happy, kind of cuter-ish aesthetic, I guess is how I'm going to describe it. But I'll get into my problem a little bit later. So in the first portion of the sketching or like drawing of the photocards footage, I am going to be showing you guys both footages of me sketching out the characters and how I wanted to do either posing or like fleshing them out with just only the sketch. I'm only going to be showing you guys one character's rendering portion, which I think if you follow me on my Instagram stories, you probably know who I ended up with, but it was not chosen by me specifically. I did end up putting both of their names on a wheel and let the wheel choose who I would be showing the footage of me coloring and rendering till completion. But yeah, for now, we're just going to be working on sketching. So for both of the characters, I ended up picking, I think for the most part, Phainon is a little bit easier for me to pose, even though I didn't really have an idea in mind. I did end up having a hard time sketching out hands for some reason for both of them, so I ended up also just making sure that I drew them on separate layers. Phainon, I drew this hand probably, I think, 3 iterations before we got to this point, and I think this is the 4th one, and then after that I'll do like a cleaner sketch, end up not liking it, we'll run into a different conundrum a little bit later, and then yeah, it's felt a little bit stupid for me to spend so much time on this particular hand for me to not really end up using it in the end, but you know, it's okay. So to make everything a little bit easier for myself overall, especially like more drawing recently, is that if I'm planning out a character and I do a rough sketch, I most likely just block in the body and the head and the pose for the character in general. Then we move on to a clean sketch, so that'll be our second layer. I'll knock back the rough sketches opacity down quite a bit so that it's not too visible, but I have like the gist of where I want certain things to be placed. Then for my clean sketch, I will most likely start off with the eyes and the face, and then we'll work on probably placing some sort of rough sketch of the body again, and then I will make a new layer for both the hair and any other elements. So in this case, I did make new layers for both of the hands. I think they might have been on the same layer, but different layer nonetheless. And then I make a new layer for the clothing and a new layer for the hair because I found it easier for me to correct things if they weren't all being placed on top of the body layer, because for me it was easier for me to correct and like erase without having to bump into other lines or being super careful when cleaning up. It just makes things a lot more quicker, in my opinion, to have a cleaner sketch at the very end. So with kind of like Phainon out of the way, we are going to be working on Mydei next. I might accidentally say Mydei occasionally in the video. I believe Mydei might be the correct way to pronounce his name. I'm not too sure. I don't really remember. It's been a long time since I've been in Amphorius in Star Rail, since I haven't been playing super consistently anymore. But his posing and just like his photocard in general was a little bit easier for me. So in Monday's video last week, or earlier this week, I guess. No, I guess today's Sunday, so it would have been last week. It was, I guess I did a little bit of sketching afterwards of designing their outfits, and there was kind of like a general vibe that I got for what I wanted to draw for Mydei, which is kind of more slightly tilted the head upwards, kind of more in a not condescending pose, but kind of a more confident. He's looking slightly down at you, physically, not hopefully at you, like mentally, hopefully. But because of that, I did have like a general idea of how I wanted to pose him. I ended up flipping him so that he's facing the the right hand side rather than the left hand side, even though initially when I was doing the one on Monday's video, he was facing the left, because it's just more natural for me to draw characters facing the left. It just feels more comfortable. But to make sure that he didn't have too much overlap with Phainon at the time, I thought that I would just make him face the right completely so that, you know, they're not too samey, if that makes sense. So after that, I ended up changing both of the sketches back to kind of like that dark muted purple, and this is kind of what both of the sketches ended up looking like. Like I said, Mydei's came out a lot quicker. I think the sketch just came out cleaner too, because I was more confident with what I was doing. But now we are letting the wheel choose who I am going to be showing you the coloring and the rendering portion. Now, I was dreading this a little bit, so I ended up getting Mydei. I was hoping for Phainon, not gonna lie, but because I didn't want to be letting my bias show of who I wanted to actually color, we just let the wheel do it. I'll just show you guys the footage and that'll be the end of that. But while I'm going to be showing you guys the coloring portion and then eventually the rendering portion, because a lot of these are like the standard steps that I typically do, so actually let me cover it first. So after I finish sketching out the character, I will duplicate that layer and hide one, and then the duplicate layer will be changed to a multiply layer, and I'll change also the line work color to be typically lighter, but because Mydei's color scheme, I wanted to keep a little bit on the darker-ish side, so I didn't really need to change my sketch color too much. The multiply did allow me to see my sketch a little bit easier anyways, but I like to start with the background first. So for the background, I ended up going with more of like black and red, and then having a little bit of spotlights. I ended up putting these, they're not like scaffolding, I don't know what they're called. It's kind of like iron beams, metal beams in the back. I've done this before for some other backgrounds in the past. It just gives it a little bit more of that slightly industrial, you're kind of seeing the ceiling of the concert venue kind of vibe. But the problem is that you don't really see it a little bit later. A lot of it gets covered by Mydei's head, alongside with the fact that as I start to blur the background and stuff, it just becomes very unrecognizable. So it just felt a little bit unnecessary. But we just kind of sped through the background portion. After that, we switch on over to a layer on top of the background, but below my sketch. And we are going to be placing one solid color, which I like to make the skin tone base typically, so that we can kind of carve out the shape of the figure, and then I will be alpha locking that shape. And starting with the skin, we are going to do coloring and shading and just like, you know, coloring everything to a certain degree. I'm not keeping the lighting as in like the environment, I guess, in mind, but I want to keep the light source in mind. So I know I want to adjust the colors at the very end, so I'm not going to be too picky about my color choices. I'm going to color it as if he's just in normal lighting, so there's no influence of the color temperature as much. So making sure that the light's coming mostly from the upper left-hand corner, just because I do have a spotlight there that is a little bit more intense than the one on the right. So I'm just going to make that the right one's like completely behind them. The one on the left is a little bit more forward, so that it's going to be hitting his body, face, and hair a little bit more on the upper left. And then after that, we work on eyes, I'll work on hair, and then once we get to rendering, I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more later. So let's talk about Phainon and kind of like why I was thinking or preferring to draw Phainon. I did say earlier that his type of character and demeanor is a little bit easier for me to draw. With that being said, I you're not going to see the same sketch that I ended up working with for Phainon for the final. I will be showing you guys like a time-lapse version at the very end after I finish up Mydei to show you guys what I ended up doing. But it was kind of like a blessing in disguise. So even though I was kind of hoping I would get Phainon so that I could work on him for the video because I wanted to draw him first, hence why I sketched him first. But the wheel told me that I should work on Mydei, which was great because his sketch and everything was just more clear to me. Phainon had too many areas where I didn't like his hair. I didn't really like how the hair was like kind of like coming in towards his face, even though I wanted like the wind to be blowing. The body just looked a little bit more awkward. I didn't like the hands. So there's a lot of things that I really didn't like. So it was kind of nice that after I finished Mydei, I had a little bit more of like confidence as well as energy to work on the next card. So I ended up scrapping the Phainon sketch completely, but not like getting rid of it entirely, because I did keep, I think, a copy of it either in my folder or because I referenced it in the same sketch as the one that I was working on for the new one. I have it somewhere and it's still fairly similar, but the sketch did turn out quite different in my opinion, so I'll show you guys at the end. But for now, after the coloring is done, I do end up adjusting the sketch layer colors to be a little bit more softer. Then I merge that with my colors, and then we're adding blend modes at this point. So blend mode layers that I like to use, especially for like idol cards or like placing a character back into their environment, I have 3 that I like to use. So multiply layer is to help me adjust a lighting and shadows, especially if you want something with more intense shadow. I do like using the multiply layer. So I added more of like a muted purpley blue over everything, so he looks like he's in the concert venue with you. After that, I added I think it's, sometimes I use a screen layer, but I mostly use an addition layer, and then I change it to be more of like an orangey yellow to bring our highlights as well as like a rim lighting, all that. And then last but not least, you would have saw like a really intense kind of like color popping-ish layer on top, which is me adding an overlay layer. So for all the blend mode layers that I add to my pieces, I will never use them at 100. I find them a little bit too overwhelming, and hopefully my art doesn't have to be at that point where it needed that much color adjustment. There's nothing wrong with it, but I find it easier if I put it at full intensity and then slowly knock it back. There is like a way for you to just choose more muted colors or more mid-tone colors for your overlay layer, and then just naturally let that be at 100% if you could kind of predict it. But for me, it's a little bit easier for me to pick something a little absurd looking at the first kind of like glance and then knock it back so that there's like only a subtle difference. So the thing that I like to do, and I'll do this at the very end as well because sometimes I just want even more of that contrast, is that the character's face, and a lot of the characters that I draw tend to have usually a slightly more warmer skin tone, or I guess I typically more like lean it more towards that way. So like even if the character's skin tone, let's say, is blue, a lot of the shadows and stuff, I might lean a little bit more slightly warmer, especially if it's around the face, to give them more of that warmer flushed tone-ish, even regardless of like the skin tone color. Hopefully it doesn't like look too off. So if the character does have like a cooler skin tone, I still try to make sure that as long as in comparison to the other areas that it still looks cool, it should be okay. But because Mydei does have more of like a warmer-ish kind of color scheme, I did end up adding more of like an orangey or a pink tone towards like the face and the hair. And then as we move away from the body, to give a little bit of like color difference and just a bit of a contrast, I did end up adding more of like a blue or a purple to the lower half alongside with like the bottom right hand corner to give it a little bit more of that push. Now, something that I usually don't do, but I'm kind of glad I did it for Mydei's photocard, and like more specifically, is because his outfit came out so dark, I ended up adding a screen layer at the very bottom as a very light purple. It does look very weird right now, but it does help for like the printing process a little bit later so that it doesn't look like a black void as I print it. Even though my printer does a pretty good job of handling dark colors for the most part. I know if I use my laser printer, it'd probably be pitch black, even though it's not, but my photo printer does a pretty good job of separating those pretty well. So after that, we merge all those layers. I go into rendering. At this point, I've talked all over the rendering portion, but I feel like it's straightforward. It's a lot of me sharpening things up or darkening a lot of my lines. I'm kind of making things just look sharper and cleaner. So yeah, kind of like that's the rendering portion. Then we're adding some foregrounds for some of the confetti for movement and depth, and we're adding another overlay layer. So as you can see, I added more of like a blue purple, and then added a little bit more of that warmth again coming from the top left for that lighting, knocking it back significantly so that it doesn't impede with my other colors initially. Adding a little bit of text for a little bit more of that photocard signed look, and I think Mydei is pretty much finished. And for the most part, I'm going to be showing you guys kind of like the time-lapse version on my iPad right now, and then at the very end of this kind of like drawing session, I'll be also showing you guys Phainon alongside with Mydei as well. So I do think like the drawing process for Mydei was more streamlined, I guess. So similar to the one that I did of Don Hung PT, I kind of just wanted all these guys to match in a certain way. So kind of simple idol outfit. I wanted them to have kind of more of that in-ear mic kind of look alongside with it, and then having the confetti and some sort of fun background with the colors. So after that, we're going to be showing you guys the time lapse of both of them, because at this point I have not redrawn Phainon at this point. I was like looking at them right here and I'm like, no, we're getting rid of it. So first we're going to show Mydei's kind of time lapse right here. It's only going to be 30 seconds. I think I didn't talk about the template in the background. So the template in the background is also from moo.com, which is where I usually get my photocards done and made if I have time to let them print it and send it if I need like a larger batch. Otherwise, I do print them at home. But I use the same template because I want the size to be consistent. So just make sure you know where your bleed lines are and all that. So just be wary of the size and the format. So here's Phainon. As you can see, at the very beginning, you would have saw that I had the old version of Phainon that I had initially sketched out in the background just for a little bit of reference. I wanted to keep the pose similar. Ended up shrinking Phainon a little bit so that he was more in similar height and same, what is it called? Zoom level? I don't know how to say it. The same as Mydei as well. Ended up doing same process. We added the blend mode layers, ended up changing everything with, you know, shadows and lighting and all that. Adding confetti, adding another overlay layer at the very end. And I think that's it. That's it for the drawing process. So you don't have to do this part if you wouldn't like to do it, or if you're worried about like your back side of your card not being fully aligned. But I like making custom back versions of my photocards. So what I'm going to be doing is taking my old Dan Hung version, which is this Honkai Star Rail Idol, because it's supposed to be a revamp of my old Star Rail Idol version of my photocards. And I'm just going to change the color scheme. Before in the past, I would make it a little bit more like generic looking so that it can match any character. But I think it's kind of fun if I make them match their specific characters. So Phainon is very much more of like the blue and the white, a little bit of that yellow popping through. And then for Mydei, I ended up going for more of that purple and that red, a little bit of the yellow for that gold to pop through. Then we have my template. I'm not going to go over it a lot here because I believe my other videos I talked about it a lot more. I think there's one video I showed a little bit more of actually me making the template. What you want is, if you have similar size paper, which is like the standard 8.5 by 11, around that size, I only can fit about 9 cards on one sheet, hence the 9 little kind of like blue squares. So basically on my left hand side where my layers are, I have both my front side and my back side being shown and clipped to my template so that things are even, as well as everything's going to be consistent. So the way how I split up my cards this time is that Phainon, I have 5 versions, Mydei, I have 4 versions, but because there is a discrepancy in the rows, I do have to flip some of my cards. So for the back side, actually, it might be easier to explain it like this. You kind of have to know how your printer works and how it takes paper and spits out your paper after it prints. So for me, if I want to do the back side of my photo paper, I will also have to flip my backside's designs. So what I mean is mostly placement. So for the middle row, because I only have 2 Phainons and 1 of the Mydei cards, I have to flip them. So initially 4, 5, and 6 in my template would have Phainon, Phainon, Mydei, but then on the back side, I would have to flip it by putting Mydei, Phainon, Phainon, because everything is going to be flipped. But luckily, because the top row is all Phainon, I don't have to worry about that. And my entire bottom row is Mydei, I also don't have to worry about that. For printing, make sure to change your media type to whatever paper you're using. I have like a generic kind of glossy photo paper, so I'm going to be selecting that. I also go to page setup, select a borderless. I'm going to knock this all the way down so that it's basically not zooming in. I don't want it to crop anything, so we're just gonna put that on the lowest setting. I'm gonna hit OK, and we're going to go to the printing process pretty soon. And I'm pretty sure I'll show you guys what I mean by when I have to flip my page around, because you need to know how your printer feeds paper and how it spits it out, as well as just like alignment and stuff. So yeah, this is what it looks like. Hopefully the top edges and the side edges all match so that by the time you do flip your paper and start to cut, nothing is too off with our borders and cutting. So I'll see you guys when we're finished with the cutting process, or printing process, I guess. Because my Pocopia music's so loud right now, you can kind of see that my printer prints this like upside down per se. So do you know how your printer prints? All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip it over this way, which is why we made our background template basically the flipped version. So we're gonna insert our cards back in. Hopefully they're well aligned, and hopefully they don't budge too much, otherwise they're going to be misaligned a little bit later. But because we have the bleed, it shouldn't shift too much. I would recommend doing a test print if you're worried about color, but luckily usually my colors aren't too off with my printer. Sometimes they are depending on the type of ink that I have. But let's take a quick look. Actually, I'm gonna go to my webcam version so you guys can actually see this in full view at my desk. Okay, so hopefully you guys can hear me, because I don't think I changed any audio settings other than not lowering my computer fan, so you might hear that whirring in the background. But this is the... Let me flip this around. I'm trying to be careful because my nails are kind of long right now. I kind of want to paint them before Bungu Mart, but I don't want to scratch the surface. So basically, this is what the color looks like on the front. And then we flip it over. This is the back side. Now, hopefully, I won't be able to see clearly because this paper is super thick. This should be like mostly aligned front and back, because I can see that at least the discrepancy from the top margins and the side margins are pretty similar to the sides of here. I think the left and the right might be a little bit skewed, but that's the whole point of having the bleed, because it shouldn't be at least more than, I'm gonna say 5 millimeters, which I think is about how much bleed I have for each little portion. So, or not even 5 millimeters, probably less than that. Or at least I'm not worried about it, because I've done so many photocards that I haven't had the issue of the bleed not taking the brunt of my misaligned cuts or misaligned printing. Put some matte laminate to protect the photocards. It also gives it a nice matte finish, but also makes it a lot more sturdier, and it makes it feel more akin to the ones that I get manufactured at moo.com. So let's go ahead and do that. This is the laminating sheet that I am going to be using. You can find similar ones, I think, on like AliExpress. There's some other versions out there as well, but you can get these sometimes fairly cheap. Otherwise, just, you know, look around, see what laminating stuff that is available to you. So these ones are the self-adhesive, and they are cold laminates, meaning that you do not need a laminator machine to apply these. You can use one afterwards, after you apply these, if you want maybe more of like a, try to get all the air bubbles out, make it entirely smooth. But I find that putting it through the laminator sometimes makes it curl a little bit. So if you do end up going that route, put it on like a cool setting rather than using either the 3 millimeter or 5 millimeter setting. Just put it on the cool one, because you don't want your cards to be warping as they're going through. Let's go ahead and prep ourselves. So I'm just gonna move this aside so you guys can kind of see. These laminating sheets will be a bit bigger. I think it's by 1 inch bigger than the height of your paper, which this is just like a standard A4 size, or about 8.5 by 11. So what we're gonna do is take our matte laminate sheet. I'm gonna peel back about 1 inch. This is probably more than 1 inch, but we're just gonna fold a section back like this. I know it's hard to see because this is clear. We're gonna bring our cards. Now, I like doing this upside down I know it doesn't really matter because at this point, whatever gets sacrificed kind of gets sacrificed. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make sure you guys can see the bottom. And we're just going to lay our laminate sheet on top and make sure that it fully covers the bottom section of your cards and the sides so that you don't see any color peeping through. And then the last thing you want to do is make sure that you lay this basically completely flat and adhere our little section. So the reason why I do about an inch, or I guess it would be better to do probably a little bit more than an inch, whatever this amount is. You guys can see that. Is because I make sure that the bottom of this side is fully flushed to the bottom. And then this way I have a little bit of a place to adhere to the table with this little lip. And hopefully you don't have any like ripples or air bubbles at this point, because as soon as you start pushing your laminate downwards, you might have a lot of creasing and crinkling of your laminate, which is going to ruin your cards. So we're just going to adhere this to that so it doesn't move, and we're going to get a squeegee. So my goal is to use the squeegee to make sure that there's no creasing or air bubbles. So the thing that I like to do is the fact that if you lift this up, hopefully this will continue to slide with you. It just is the backing sheet, and we're going to lift our laminate up and push with our squeegee. So it's gonna be hard for you guys to see at this point because there's not really a good angle. So we're just doing this section by section slowly. Where is my phone? I'm not too sure how well you guys are gonna see that. But if you press down on this harder, you can kind of get rid of these little bubbles, which we'll do a little bit later. Right now, I'm just concerned, or mostly concerned about making sure that everything is just adhered properly. And then, yeah, this is what the colors look like with the matte laminate. I'm gonna show you guys the back side. This is kind of like the before the matte laminate comes on, as well as that this side of the brochure paper or glossy photo paper that I use has a little bit more of like a bumpy, rough side. The other side's completely smooth, so I always make sure that my art of the character is on the smooth side, and then the kind of like slightly bumpier side is with the backing side or the back design. Even though like when I put the matte laminate, it's not gonna really matter that much, but let's go ahead and adhere our other side as well. Okay, no bubbles, so we're good. Flip this around. Adhere this to my desk or any surface that you find that works. Just slowly apply your matte laminate. So now what you want to be careful with is on squeegees, they still have like a harder edge on the corners. So just be mindful of how you're pressing down with your squeegee. More easily than these ones when it comes to putting pressure. So I would recommend putting another sheet of paper down and going over it like this if you're doing something that, you know, might need to put a lot of pressure to get those air bubbles out. So I ended up skipping through the cutting portion. So I want to do a bit of a test. So I'm just going to be cutting out the bottom portions of Mydei's first, and then later on I'll be cutting out the rest altogether. I would usually do like all of my horizontals first, and then I'll do all my verticals next, and then that'll be probably the quickest way for me to cut out all of my photo cards at once. But I kind of wanted to check what the back portion looks like so that they were fully aligned, and I saw that there was a bigger discrepancy than I remembered. So I'm going to be slowly shifting my template a little bit later so that the back is a little bit more centered than usual, because the text is like slightly a little bit more to the right than I would like it to be. So yeah, just do a bit of print testing before you do big batches. I would highly recommend that, unless you're not too worried about like the back side, and feel free to do whatever. Might be a bit more of a strange view, but this is what the cards look like. I think they turned out well. I'm glad I didn't make them overly dark. But like I mentioned, the corners, too pointy to my taste. So what we're gonna use is a corner rounder. So you can buy these online. There's like different types. My favorite is the 5mm for photo cards, as well as like rounding out sticker sheets because they make the corners just like a little bit round. They're not like excessively. I think I have another one that might be 1 centimeter, I believe. But these ones I find are the closest to the ones that I get manufactured by Moo. So as long as I'm careful, these actually round out pretty nicely. And I'm making sure that they go in evenly. Otherwise, sometimes you're left with more of a rounded oblong rather than a rounded corner. So just to double check, I'm just gonna line them and check all sides so that I didn't miss any. And for the most part, they're all relatively the same size. There is like a bit, maybe like a millimeter discrepancy for some of them, depending on how accurate I was cutting, but it's very like not noticeable. So yeah, this is my favorite way to make photo cards at home, and you can get like a pretty big batch out of them, even just with one sheet. You can see I got 5 of Phainon and we have 4 of Mydei, and then they match nicely by changing just the back side. And these ones are Danheng PT. Yeah, I think they turned out actually super nice, and I think they look super cute. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed watching me make some photo cards and watching me design their outfits, which I ended up changing a little bit more, I think, for Phainon, which I probably would have talked about during the drawing phase for his, because I ended up restarting his because I hated it, and I had more fun drawing Mydei for some reason, despite him being more of like a character I would struggle with drawing. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me make some photo cards today, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. And if you came to see me at Bungu Mart, hopefully I wasn't too tired or too shy, but thank you for stopping by, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!